Welcome to a new episode of the Straight Wrestling Voices of the Indies podcast. I'm your host Morbo, and with me, as always, everyone's favorite US independent wrestling fan, Sebastian.
Thank you as always for the introduction, Morbo, and welcome to this week's episode of Straight Wrestling Voices of the Indies. And I think that our guest today is one of the multi-talented people we have today in independent wrestling. He's known as a wrestler. He's known as a referee. He does match graphics. He is someone who's made a name for himself, not only in the southeast of the United States and in the wrestling scene of the southeast of the United States, but also in other parts of the US and also in the UK. And therefore, we are very happy to have him as our guest today. Kody Manhorn, Shiny Shoes, or Aaron Noyes. Thank you very much for being our guest today, Aaron.
Thank you guys for having me. I have also done a little bit of commentary with H2O now too, so adding to the toolbox.
Hey Aaron, for the people who don't know who you are, who is Aaron Noyes, but also who is Kody Manhorn and who's Shiny Shoes?
Oh, that's a really fun question because they're really all the same person. I like to think of each one as a little bit of a different personality of myself. Aaron Noyes is just a very quiet kid from middle of nowhere, Western New York, a town I promise you've never heard of. While Kody Manhorn is usually my more energetic, rambunctious side. For anyone who's seen me in the ring, I think you can definitely tell that. And then Shiny Shoes for me is just he's the part of me that loves to have a little bit of fun. That's why I love I love doing deathmatch reffing. It gives me a chance to kind of just let loose a little bit. That's the way I like to explain it.
How did you come up with the idea of two separate characters as a referee and a wrestler?
So my original trainer, actually, whom I'm not going to name, but he, one of the first things he told me is that I was actually never going to make it as a wrestler, and that I was better off refereeing. And I was willing at that point to do anything to get into the business. So I did just start as an official. But I realized pretty quickly it was not a good good training environment for me. So I moved over and started training under Jaden Newman in the Chattanooga area. And he really did push and motivate me to become a wrestler. And then his trainer, Kerry Awful, he always said to be your own favorite comic book hero. And for me, that was Bruce Banner and Hulk. So to be able to play with the idea of two different personalities in one body, it's just having fun with wrestling, really.
What are the differences between the characters Kody Man and Shiny Shoes, but what are maybe also the similarities? And also, how much of the person Aaron Noyes is included in Kody Manhorn and Shiny Shoes?
So as far as their differences, Shiny Shoes, I try to always present as a little bit more timid. He still has that authority of from bell to bell that a good official should have. But at the end of the day, it is that I'm a referee. If a wrestler were to touch me, then, we make the joke, you have one hit point for anyone who likes video games. So I'm going to go down immediately. While Kody Manhorn is very the heart of the underdog. No matter how many times you knock him down, he's going to get back up. He's going to keep fighting. So it's always that fighting spirit with him. As far as similarities, I think that really ties into the other question you asked as far as how much of Aaron Noyes is inside the characters. And that's, I think, any good wrestling character, either as a referee, as an official, as a commentator, whatever you're doing, it's just you turned up to a different degree. It's just, for me, I try to figure out what parts of Aaron Noyes can I turn up to 11 to differentiate the characters.
How would you compare being a referee to being an active wrestler?
Despite popular belief, I actually find it more exhausting to do refereeing, mostly because I'm inside the ring a lot more, especially like shows like ICW, where there's been times where I'm the only referee on the card, or if I'm lucky enough to have Gina Monty with me, or Jesse Fields, it will be every other match. But that's an exhausting rotation because you're just moving in and out of the ring constantly. While with wrestling, I'm in there for maybe 10, 15 minutes at the most, and then that's my night. I'm done. I can go hang out with the boys.
You are not only a referee and a wrestler, but also a graphic designer. You make match graphics for TWE, for example, for your match you had at TWE against Daniel Makabe. How important are graphic designers in wrestling, in your opinion, and do you think that they get appreciated enough?
I think they're one of the most underappreciated things in all pro wrestling, honestly. I think it's wrestlers and wrestler adjacent figures. We focus so much on the inside the ring performance stuff, especially on the independent level. But I always talk I talk about this a lot with Jaden. If it's not broke, don't fix it. In the WWE, they're making millions of dollars, and a lot of that comes from their presentation. I originally, when I was studying in school, I studied sports management, so I have a little bit of a insight on this, and a lot of it just goes to presentation. So if you can try to make your match feel bigger than it is with like an individualized match graphic, because I actually did graphics for all those matches for the TWE versus the Indie show. If you can make it feel bigger, then the person watching is going to think it's bigger than maybe what it actually is. Or you are going to start getting some confidence as well, and that goes into like everything from graphics to video packages to how you're announced when you're going to the ring, the music choices you have. Anything that can present you as a bigger star is going to relate to the fan of this person's important and I should care about them more.
When I knew that we would have you as our guest on Straight Wrestling Voices of the Indies, I thought back and thought about when I saw you for the first time. And I think the first time that I ever saw you was as a referee in New South Pro Wrestling in 2020 at the shows Top Shelf and 5th Anniversary. Was this the time you started? And what can you maybe also tell us about this time?
So I actually started in 2018. It was a very much of a, because my original training school, they did actually shut down pretty shortly after he told me I couldn't be a wrestler. So I very much just tried to do whatever I could. I immediately went to Jaden and said, "Hey, I was doing a little reffing at the school. Could any chance I could work with TWE a little bit?" And he let me do that. And then SCI then invited me to the first Future Showcase, where I got to kind of get my feet wet with them in action wrestling. By 2020, like you said, that's really where I kind of felt like I was plateauing a little bit in my refereeing career. So I wanted to find some new places to explore out. And New South was very close. They were a weekly show on IWTV. My friend Jesse Fields was reffing there at the time as well. So I just really wanted to show some face because I think that's one of the most important things you can do in wrestling as an up and coming anything in independent wrestling is just find the promoters, show your face, be willing to do what you can to help out.
You already referred to it that you started to have matches as Kody Manhorn in 2020, and you had a match for New South. And you already had matches for TWE before that, also in the same year. Would you say that New South or maybe even more TWE are kind of your home promotions, both in terms of wrestling and or refereeing?
Oh, I will always say TWE is my home promotion. Yeah. I very proudly wear those letters. TWE's. I think we talked about this earlier in a post that I put out on Instagram, and Facebook, that TWE gave me a place to grow. And if it wasn't for people like Dylan Hales, the Rev, Dan Wilson, Jaden Newman, they take care and time to put into each one of their students individually to allow them to nurture and grow as wrestlers, as characters, and even as businessmen. Dylan Hales does not get enough credit for what he actually has done for each and every one of us individually. But that will always be my home promotion. They've given me, they gave me my dream match against Daniel Makabe. So I'm always going to put them over.
If we look at the career of the wrestler Kody Manhorn, I feel like 2021 was the year where it really got going for you. You started to appear for Action Next Up, for example. How important were these matches that you had at Next Up for your career?
once you, because I want to say I started repping in 2018. It was either late 2019, I believe, that I started wrestling. It might be late 20, or it might be 2020 as well. Time flies. But at that stage of my career, it was very much just get reps. Whatever I could do to get in a ring. Actually, my action proper debut, I wrestled on the Next Up before that show as well. And they looked at me and said, "Are you sure you want to wrestle this?" I said, "Yeah, I need ring time." Because I have gotten plenty of ring time as an official with the various shows that I've worked for, various shows I've traveled for, especially with ICW and such, SCI, New South at that time as well. But it was I wanted to make sure I was always getting reps as a wrestler, so that way I could catch up on that skill level. Because I'm not one to ever really be satisfied with being just being a wrestler was never my goal. I wanted to be a good wrestler. I wanted to be somebody that people wanted to wrestle.
If we also look at the year 2021, you appeared as a part of Action Future Showcase in a non-tournament action alongside Aaron Wade as a part of the Squatting Dragons against Arthur MacArthur and Damian Turner during the SCI weekend. Would you describe this as like a first milestone of your career?
I think that was definitely a big milestone. Because that was, like you said, that's the first time I got featured onto an SCI product, or SCI adjacent product, and also be part of that weekend. It was really special, especially, peek behind the curtain. I got to share that with one of my best friends and Aaron Wade. Just to be able, and again, it would have that moment with him. It wasn't just a milestone for me; it was a milestone for us as a tag team. Because that was in the height of like one of our better runs during the time. So yeah, that was definitely a big moment for both of us to be part of.
You mentioned Aaron Wade being a friend, and you mentioned the tag team. And for me personally, the Squatting Dragons is something that I really associate you with, and I think many people do. How important was, or maybe still is, the tag team for your career, and maybe also for Aaron Wade's career?
I think it would taught us both how to be better wrestlers. Dylan Hills has always said the easiest type of wrestling match to have a good match in is just a simple Southern tag, because it just teaches you and makes you very comfortable with the basic formula of what wrestling is supposed to be at its meat and potatoes, as we say in America. Um, so to be able to kind of get an understanding of that, it teaches you very much how to, either A, be a good baby face, or B, be a good heel. Um, and just have a full understanding of that. I love tag team wrestling. It's one of my favorite things to do. So whenever we have our student shows at TWE, I love getting put into tag team wrestling and being able to share my experiences and things I learned during that run with the new kids.
Speaking of Dylan Hales, you were establishing yourself in the Southeast in 2021, and you also appeared as a part of the Incarnation Gauntlet for Southern Underground Pro, which is no longer existing, and which was a promotion where Dylan Hales was responsible for. What can you tell us about this experience, and maybe also Southern Underground Pro, or working for Southern Underground Pro in general?
Man, Southern Underground Pro was one of my favorite shows that I've ever done. I got to actually meet one of my big influences, or one of my big mentors. Yeah, mentors and influence when it comes to officiating. During my time officiating there, in Doug Markham, we used to call me Young Doug. It was pretty fun. It was also part of the promotion that taught me to have fun in wrestling, because at the end of the day, a lot of the fans that were there weren't wrestling fans. They were just some punk people that found a bar that just happened to have some guys slapping each other, and they said, "Hey, let's go watch this and figure out what's going on." It's where I got to meet a lot of people that I'm close with now: Brett Eisen, Kevin Koo. Like I said, I became very good friends with Dylan Hales during that time. As a wrestler, it was definitely a goal to get to work for Southern Underground Pro. I do regret the fact that that was during the COVID lockdown, so we did have to perform. It was a no crowd show. It was just the closed set taping. To been able to experience getting to wrestle in especially the Basement East uh, with a full packed crowd, them getting rowdy as they always do. That would have been a dream come true for me. I hope one day maybe we'll make a reunion tour and we'll get to do it one more time. But hey, can always hope.
Fast forward to the last year, to 2023, you started to appear for two promotions which are known for hardcore and deathmatch wrestling in H2O and ICW No Holds Barred. Was the style of wrestling or being active in this environment something you always wanted to do or at least try?
I won't say I always wanted to do it. I've always loved deathmatch wrestling. I always would make the jokes that my two favorite types of wrestling is I like the very gritty technical style of wrestling. Of like example, I'll always say Daniel Makabe, Thatcher, Danielson, people like that. Um, but I love deathmatch wrestling. That's my second favorite. Two polar opposites to an extent because I grew up watching people like Danny Havoc, like Matt Tremont, Marcus Crane of the old CZW days. So I've always loved deathmatch wrestling. It wasn't until I officiated one for the first time that I really was like, this is kind of fun. And it kind of re-sparked because my love for wrestling. I did have a little bit of a down period before I got really into deathmatch wrestling, which my first deathmatch was around 2019 for the Indiana Collective, for part of GCW. I was reffing for a show called Paradigm, based out of the Midwest. Excuse me, and they let me ref a deathmatch. They had me take a bump in that deathmatch, so I got fully thrown right into it, and I just remembered having fun, and it re-sparked my love, and that's when I kind of set a goal to become part of the ICW crew. I was able to accomplish that with my late friend Sean Patrick O'Brien, um, and and I got to spend more time around him. I got to become friends with people like the Kirks, Danny DeMonto, Hoodfoot, people like that, and it made me feel a family atmosphere, which is something I've always thrived for in everything in life. And just being able to experience that's really where it's like I want to keep doing this, and that evolved into me wanting to wrestle death matches, which you have seen you have seen what that has blossomed into, especially with my match against Matt Tremont earlier this year.
You see, what are the differences between, and I put this in quotation marks, normal matches and these kinds of like hardcore death matches? And what are the differences both in terms of being an active wrestler and also being a referee in these matches?
As a referee, you have to be so much more focused, because there's a lot of sharp ends going on, and at the end of the day, this is a form of entertainment. And none of us are making, not many of us, I will say, are making a killing uh, doing this to our bodies. We get paid more than what the internet likes to believe, but we're not making, a living for say. Um, and at the end of the day, we all want to go home. We want to be able to go back to our normal jobs the next day. So, as a referee, you have to be so focused because you're that first line of defense as far as being able to keep, super sharp edges of glass, keep that smushed down, getting tube endings out of the way, make sure no one's taking, an accidental bump onto a chair that's just turned wrong or still broken. You want to make sure they have a clear stage to be able to perform on. Um, as a wrestler, I actually don't think there's as much difference in deathmatch in regular wrestling as people like to believe there is. There's just an extra level of thrill and danger. And when it comes to actually putting it together, we're still just calling a wrestling match. It's just instead of, calling punch punch, I'm calling light tube. Or, instead of, hey, I'm just going to give you the DVD. Well, maybe I'll give you the DVD, but then I have to escalate it again. And now I have to give you the DVD through a table, and just try to continue to build that story with an extra level of violence.
Thinking of refereeing, it is not that unusual for you that you have been refereeing as Shiny Shoes and also been wrestling as Kody Manhorn on the same show. How physically and mentally challenging, or maybe even exhausting, is this?
Oh, exhausting. I feel that on the back end. Once I get finished with it, that's when it's really try to catch my breath from everything that just went through. Um, I kind of live for those kind of things, though. That thrill and excitement. I think that's part of why I fell in love with deathmatch wrestling to begin with. But to have that kind of experience because it's so rewarding with the crowd. Because at the end of the day, they know shiny shoes. For example, with ICW and TWE are two of the big examples we've done that spot with. Um, they know who Shiny Shoes is, and they appreciate him. I'm very active amongst the fan bases there. Trying to be friendly and such. But they also know who Kody Manhorn is. So when they get to see that moment of Kody Manhorn's coming out of the shell, or as I referred to it earlier, Bruce Banner and Hulk, with the Hulk coming out, it's just like you would in the comic books. It's game time, and that emotion they give for that moment, it feeds to me. And in the moment, I don't even notice how tired I am, or how exhausting I am. It's go time, and I'm feeding off of that. And I'm getting giddy right now just thinking about it because just of how an amazing of an experience it is every time.
Speaking of the Hulk coming out, as you put it, on November 18th of last year, ICW Notes Part Volume 55 took place in the TWE Arena in Red Bank, Tennessee. And you had a match against Danny DeManto, and then there we saw referee Shiny Shoes going into the locker room and Kody Manhorn coming out. Was this playing with the two identities in such a spot something you planned on doing in the first place when you came up with the idea of the two characters?
I actually had a lot of really crazy ideas of how to play with that. I'm still looking for the show that will allow me to have Shiny Shoes and Kody Manhorn as a tag team, and just allowing me taking my glasses to be my tags. One day I'll get this, but yeah, it was. I think to create such a story element like that, and not to play around with it in ways that allow it to evolve and such, or to be shown to the crowd, it's just a wasted idea. And like I said, it's me being my favorite comic book hero, and I think comic books, especially in modern day where Marvel is such a big thing in DC, I think the majority of fans, especially the wrestling demographics, they're going to understand that, and they're going to be able to kind of piece together what's going on. Um, and I think if wrestling is easily digestible in something that the fan has seen before, it's much easier to enjoy. Once you try to overthink things, is where it kind of you might be doing a little too much for nothing. But I think something like that, it's easy for the crowd to understand because what they saw is Shiny Shoes, this innocent baby, just getting a gusset driven in his head, and his boss essentially beating him up. And we've all had, that bad boss where we're just like, man, I wish I could punch him in the face. And Shiny Shoes got carted off. And next thing you know, Kody Manhorn was out there and saying, yeah, now I am going to beat up my boss. Just like a Stone Cold. That was basically his whole gimmick. He got to beat up Vince McMahon. And I think that's just very understandable for the crowd. And it gives them something to really latch into and sink their teeth on.
Speaking of refereeing and ICW No Holds Barred, as a referee, you were a part of the ICW No Holds Barred UK tour in February of last year. How influential was this for you, especially given that you have been to the UK multiple times since, including just a few weeks ago?
So that actually was the second time, because we did have one, I want to say earlier in the year before. I might have the dates wrong, but that one in February, that one was kind of wild to me because that would have been the weekend in Hull. So I was only there for 3 days. I flew back to the States, spent a week, maybe 2 here, and then I was flying back for my original tour as a wrestler with PCW. But the UK has always had a special place to me because I am a big soccer or football, whichever one you want to call it, fan, and I watch a lot of Premier League football. So to be able to kind of experience this culture that one my family derives from heritage wise, as well as that I'd always been able to see on TV and experience those kind of things. It was everything I dreamed of and more. I got to take myself uh, to Manchester that weekend, look at Old Trafford, and that really set a goal for me of like I got to find a way to get inside that building because I'm very big on when you take these kind of experiences in wrestling, don't let them just be, I went to England and I spent all day inside the wrestling venue and then I went to the hotel. I think that's a wasted life. I want to make sure I'm doing something to explore and more culture myself every time I'm there.
How was your recent trip, not that long ago, to the UK? And can you tell us especially about your experiences working for Progress Wrestling?
My recent experience was fantastic because that's where I got to check off my bucket list item of going to Old Trafford and getting to go to the game. Plus, we had some really fun matches with Big T Justice over there, as well as Ernest Boggs. He's a new and up and coming wrestler. I got to wrestle him, as well as getting to wrestle with Bleeding Gums against Tim Strange and Eugene. All of them were fantastic wrestlers. Great matches every single time. Really thankful to be able to work with them in the companies I got to work for, PCW and Bleeding Gums, as well as, like you mentioned, I got to be inside the room of progress, which is a big goal of mine. I think for us in the States, outside of world of sport, of like to say the more modern, progress is the pinnacle of what UK wrestling is. It's one of the easiest ones for us to be able to get our hands on. I love going back and watching some old progress stuff, and just to be inside that locker room and watch how much attention to detail they had and what I was talking about as far as that presentation. Even this most recent show they had, Cara Noir made their return, and I watched them for almost 30 minutes just practicing their entrance and getting the timing right and making sure that was pinpoint because they wanted to create an experience right off the gate. And getting to talk to the owners and James about that kind of stuff and really get an understanding of what I think is really bringing progress to the next level and differentiating it from from other independent company, and just in general, is how much they care. I was really thankful to get to work alongside Ring Crew during that time frame, to be able to do some security work, some extra work with them, and really just again go out afterwards and hang out with that roster and really get to explore the minds of some of the best wrestlers in the world right now, and like Luke Jacobs, etc. It was just a really fun experience to be able to be around them.
On the day of this recording, the return of ICW No Holds Barred after a 5-month hiatus is only a few days away. What does ICW No Holds Barred and its return mean to you personally?
ICW is my family. I think Danny has talked about it publicly on social media a couple times. There was getting a point there at the end where we were all kind of getting burnt out a lot. And I think that's going to be very apparent in wrestling in general, especially when you have such a tight knit locker room. That's show that's running so frequently and it's traveling so frequently. There's going to be a level of burnout that's going to exist. It's very satisfying to see it come back. I'm very excited to not just see those members of the locker room that I haven't gotten to see in a while, to not just be able to be inside the chains again, to experience what it is to be an ICW show day, but just to see the fans. Because we do have a merch group on Facebook where I get to interact with them a lot through internet communication, but it's not the same as in person. I think we all can understand that after going through COVID with lockdown. Virtual communication is just not the same as that in-person experience. It's the same with viewing a show. It's not the same as watching from a computer screen or your TV, as being inside that building, and to be able to feel the energy of the ICW crowd surrounding that ring again, standing in the middle of the chains and hearing Danny say those famous words. It's an experience that I've been waiting for again, and I'm very excited to be back amongst my people.
What would you say? What does the return of RCW No Holds Barred mean for independent wrestling in general, maybe hardcore and deathmatch wrestling in particular?
I think it's pretty apparent. Deathmatch wrestling really carried independent wrestling in the U.S., especially through on at least the visual scene through the pandemic. And it really, the pandemic was almost a revitalization for American deathmatch wrestling. Because at the end of the day, to do wrestling at all in the States, you had to be able to find your way around it of, where can we run that's going to allow us to do this, and so on and so forth, and get through the precautions. Well, deathmatch wrestling, we have to do that naturally, because not every state's going to allow glass. Not every building that you go to, even if the state does, is not going to allow glass to be inside their building. There's different licensing requirements in the US, and sometimes that involves, you can't bleed. For example, state of Kentucky, you have 2 minutes to finish a match if someone begins to bleed in it, even if it's just a bloody nose. So there was already levels that we had to go through. So for deathmatch wrestling or ICW, which is probably, in my opinion, the most, in its biased opinion, I'll say it, is probably the most prominent full-time deathmatch company. There are other companies that do deathmatch that probably are bigger than us, but we are the only ones doing deathmatch throughout the entire card still on a show by show basis. I think it's just reminding that deathmatch isn't dead, especially because there's such a young crop of deathmatch wrestlers that are coming up. I'll say Kody Manhorn being one of them, Jameson Shook, a lot of the H2O kids, Alex Stretch, Anthrax. There's a lot of good deathmatch wrestling. JB Anderson, I could keep going. I feel bad because I'm not naming some of my friends now. They know who they are though. I think ICW coming back is just reminding deathmatch isn't dead, and this is an art form just as much as anything else in wrestling.
Would you say that Danny DeManto, your boss, as you earlier referred to him, is a kind of a mentor for you?
I would say, in a way, I am very adamant, and this is just a personality trait of me. I will always say the person that made Kody Manhorn, Shiny Shoes, Aaron Noyes, whichever one you want to refer to me as, it's me. But I will always say I've always made sure to sit under every tree that I possibly can. I think Danny, I will say he's a good friend of mine. I've gone to Yankees games with him. I've hung out with him both in office, in person, at shows, at after shows. Um, to an extent, yeah, I would say he's definitely a mentor. Because again, I think if you're not trying to learn in whatever field you're in, whatever that may be, you're not trying to succeed anymore. You're just existing. Um, and I appreciate Danny because he'll even sometimes watch my matches and he'll send me some critiques on it. I'm always appreciative for things like that. Of what can I do to take myself to the next level? Because I'm very much under the influence that I will never call myself the best, and I don't care what other people or the internet wants to say. If I can't prove that to myself, then your opinion is just your opinion, and I'm going to continue to try to push myself until I can sit there and say, maybe I am the best. And at that point, I might just say, then I think I'm going to leave because that means I can't grow anymore.
The other hardcore promotion that you are active for is H2O, and you were a part of Uncharted Territory Season 5 as both a wrestler and a referee. What can you tell us about this experience?
I love Uncharted Territory. I was also a small feature on Season 4 when it was in the Southeast at TWE. But it was really fun to be able to, inside this building, again, kind of push myself. I had ventured other places, but I had primarily been wrestling in the Southeast at TWE, at Action Wrestling. I was in a comfortable spot for myself. So for me to not only push myself into a new market in front of a new fan base, but also to expose myself almost weekly as a wrestler on a week by week basis. And then sometimes in these matches, I had to do something I'm not comfortable with of being the heel or the aggressor. It wasn't always true heel mentality, but being more aggressive in the match and driving the heat. The it's not something I'd had to do many times. And I threw myself into a trial by fire situation. This is a program that was getting watched by, thousands across IWTV. It was a weekly product. It was live. It was new fans that I hadn't wrestled in front of more. And to have been able to find success doing all of that, it's really relieving, and it's really motivating to, try to figure out a way to push yourself to those next goals.
When we talk about important things in your career, we have to talk about this year's Scenic City Invitational we get. And first of all, you were the referee for Daniel Makabe's last match on day one of the Scenic City Invitational against Kevin Koo. For you as someone who's close to Daniel and also had a match with him, how much did this mean to you, and what were your emotions going into this?
It meant the absolute world, because I kind of always had a figure that when I found out his last match was going to be at SCI, that I was going to be the one to officiate it. That WrestleMania, he wrestled Timothy Thatcher for the last time. I looked at my friend Gina, who was also very close to Daniel. And with that under my mind, I said, "Hey, I want you to have this match." And she looked at me and said, "Are you sure?" And I said, I think I know what match I'm going to have. My last match with him is going to be, and I want you to have a special moment as well. So I let her have that one. And then he comes up to me. Daniel, being Daniel, he's very emotional. Comes up to me afterwards. He said, "I want you to," he's already crying because he just wrestled Thatcher. He looked and said, "I want you to ref my last match." And I looked at him and said, "I kind of figured." And I started getting a little teary because I'm a very emotional person. So when it actually came to time to officiate that match, I remember Matt Griffin, the promoter for Action Wrestling in Scenic City, he said, "Do you only want to ref that match and just let everyone else ref the ones before?" Because we knew I'd be wrestling the second night. And I said, "Absolutely not. I don't want to have to think about for 2 hours the fact that I'm about to officiate my best friend's last match. I want something to be able to distract me for a little while." And when I finished my last match before that one, I just started pacing around because it was terrifying. Because again, I think if you're not nervous in wrestling, you probably don't love it. And beyond just being nervous about the fact that I'm about to go perform, I was going to get to perform with one of the absolute best in the world, two of the absolute best in the world, in Koo and Makabe. And as far as my emotion, I think that was very clear when I got in the ring to officiate that match, because I couldn't stop it. I knew I felt the tears immediately. And I remember, I'm very bad with names. I've seen them 1,000 times, but there was a fan in the front row. They're holding their expression. They see my face and I just see them start bawling as well. And they just point at me and I'm like, this one's going to be hard. And when I made the final count on that match, I didn't want to move. Because in my brain, it was the second I raised his hand, it's really over. Still hoping that he gets that match with Danielson one time. Hopefully it's in the Pacific Northwest, so I can fly myself out there to get to watch that happen. I know that's his absolute dream match, and he was my dream match. So I really want to see my friend be able to get what he wants.
The second important moment at this year's SCI weekend was when you won the Scramble match on day 2 and became the first entrant for the Scenic City Invitational 2025, so next year's SCI. What are your thoughts going into the SCI next year, and what does it mean for your career?
I think from a career standpoint, right, it's very clear what it means. I am a Scenic City, Chattanooga, Tennessee, born and bred wrestler. It is, like I said, TWE is my home. So to be able to represent that in one of the biggest independent wrestling tournaments in the entire world, it means the world to me. But beyond a professional level, from a personal level, in 2015, for those who didn't know, I served in the United States Marine Corps. I was a reservist stationed in Chattanooga, Tennessee. This is before I had ever met Jaden Newman or anybody in professional wrestling. I didn't even know I wanted to be an independent wrestler at that time. But the station that I was stationed at, it came under attack from a terrorist incident. And I lost 5 of my closest friends that day. And I always remember the day we went to bury Staff Sergeant Wyatt at the National Cemetery in Chattanooga. And it was a really hard day for me. I already had a little bit of some personal traumas when it came to funerals already, and having to go to way too many at a very young age. And I'm 18 at the time when this is happening. And it's already a very hard day for me. But I saw the city of Chattanooga just lining up the streets. They're waving flags. They're waving them or draping them over bridges. The streets are shut down. They were lining the road outside of our unit with different memorials and stuff. And I always say Chattanooga was there for me on my darkest day. So to get to wrestle almost to the day, the 10-year anniversary of that event in that city on such a big stage, it means the absolute world to me. I think reality is art, and wrestling isn't art. So the more that I can bring the emotions that are inside of me to the forefront, to that table, it's just an opportunity to really be able to take my friends that I lost on that day and just get a chance to tell their story. Because I think in the moments of tragedy like that, especially when it comes to like patriotic events, I'll call them, it's very easy to, after time goes by, it's just a day we remember. But for me, that was the worst day of my life, and I'm never going to forget it. And it's not just an annual thing. So for me to get to, on that 10-year anniversary, be able to have my friends on my chest and represent them, that's really what the SCI of 2025 means to me.
My last question before Morbo talks about what is next for you. You have been the referee of ETU Marcus Mathers All I Want 3 on last Thursday, September 26th. And I would like to know, what are your thoughts on this show in general? And what are your thoughts on one match you refereed as well with Mike Bailey against Robbie Eagles in particular?
So I think that was one of the best ETU events, and I think Struggs has said that as well on Twitter. I think it was a very well done show, but I think it was also very talent loaded. So it's going to be very hard to have a bad show. There was some fantastic wrestlers from all across the world on that show. I had a lot of fun with the match that you mentioned, as well as the Kylie Ray versus Brandon Kirk match. That was a very fun one to be able to be part of as well. For the Speedball and Eagles match, that is one of the probably, I say it's one of the best independent wrestling matches that I've ever been part of. But I think it's also a stretch to say independent wrestling match, considering both are heavily featured on television products right now. So it goes into it's iron sharpens iron almost in a sense. When you put two very good wrestlers, and you could have put any referee we had on that card, because we had myself, we had Gina, we had Adam Galt, as well as DM Stevens was even on standby in case we needed more officials. It was just a very good environment and a very good group of people that you were able to elevate. I absolutely love that match. It gave me everything I love in wrestling, which is a sense of realism, which I think Speedball does a fantastic job of doing, while also always being able to tell a story throughout the wrestling.
Do you already have a goal for next year's SCI?
For next year's SCI, the goal is to win. I think that's the easy answer. But no, I think from a personal level, it is just if I can get my friend's story across, right? To be able to to put them on my shoulders and be able to convene to the world how great of people they were.
You have been outside of the Southeast at the East Coast and also in the UK. Are there any regions in and outside of the US where you want to be active as a referee or wrestler? And are there certain promotions you would like to be active for?
Specific regions, I will say the Pacific Northwest, in the West Coast specifically. There is I can't remember the name right now, and I feel really bad about this, but there's a show in Las Vegas that Darian Bankston has been a part of. I really would love to be able to, get on that trip with him sometime to show what I can do on the West Coast, either as an official or as a ref. West Coast Pro, I think, is the easy answer when just talking about the West Coast in general, as well as prestige wrestling in the Pacific Northwest. I love traveling. It's the whole reason I got into wrestling. It's my biggest goal is to be able to see everywhere I can. Outside of the U.S., it is the only goal that has eluded my goal list actually for this year is Japan, especially as a deathmatch official. That is an ultimate goal. I think actually just as independent wrestling in general, we all want to do Japan. Heck, I don't even know if it's just independent. It might just be wrestlers. Japan is a very big and heavy goal for me.
We have come to know you as a multi-talent in wrestling, being a wrestler, a referee, and a graphic designer. Are there even more roles in wrestling that you would like to play? For example, as a manager or even a promoter?
Oh, God, the temptation to promote is or book a show is very tempting. But I think everyone's doing that here recently, especially in the TWE, because Jamison just had his show. He did a stellar job. So I'm trying to not fall for that trap. I'm actually having a lot of fun here at H2O doing commentary here recently. That's really been my big pet project of exploring. Outside of wrestling, I've started to get a little bit more into video editing as well. I think I'd also have fun if I were to get into some managing, but I would really want to make sure that they fit what I'm doing character wise with the Kody Manhorn if I were to ever really fall into that.
As it was announced last week, you will be a participant of Matt Tremont's Tournament of Death on October the 27th in your home, so to speak, the TWE Arena in Red Bank, Tennessee. What are your feelings going into this? What does it mean to you both personally and also professionally?
I think professionally, it is very. I do enjoy being part of tournaments. I think they add a different level of preparation going into wrestling to a story because you have to be able to understand where you are in the card and or where you are in the tournament as well. If you're going to be moving on, what can you do to help elevate the people that are not? If you are going to the final, how can you show yourself as a credible person to win to the new fan that's there for the first time, as well as without showing everything you do as not to spoil, the main event, the part that should be the big fireworks show that the crowd gets most excited for. From a personal level, it is such an honor to be invited to a deathmatch tournament by the greatest deathmatch wrestler in American history, Matt Tremont. He has grown to become a good friend of mine. You can see that on The Life of on IWTV. I'm actually the first person that talks about it, so you don't have to wait long to hear how special he is to me. And just the fact that he would trust me to be in that environment, to be a good performer in that environment, as well as, potentially wrestling some of his students and his trainees in that kind of environment. It's a certain level of trust that I'm very honored to have.
Are there any more upcoming matches or shows that you would like to talk about?
Let me real quick look at my calendar. I mean, the big ones are the ICW shows that are upcoming this weekend at time of recording. We do have the ETU has its anniversary show. I want to say in November or December. I'll also be I don't have these exact dates in front of me. I wish I did. You can see all this stuff on social media. So for the shows, NGW based out of Knoxville, Tennessee, will be having their anniversary show as well in November. They are featured on High Spots. If you've never caught one of their events, they are very fun events as well. They have a lot of talent that are former WWE talent, including Breezango. which again, it's just a very fun time, very fun show, very fun atmosphere, very sup-like it to an extent.
Okay, Aaron, that's it. We are at the end of the interview. And as always, the stage is yours. You can plug and promote anything you want.
I appreciate that. You can find me on all my social medias at either at Ref Shiny Shoes or at Kody Manhorn. I also stream on Twitch usually on a Tuesday or Monday. They usually alternate depending on if I'm wrestling. And that is twitch.tv/Ref Shiny Shoes. And I really appreciate you guys for having me.
Thank you very much for the interview, Aaron. I think it was a very cool interview. And Sebastian, I really follow your career really, really closely. And I can say that I'm always marking out when I see you as a referee. Maybe at a GCW show, a JCW show, ETU or TWE, I'm always marking out and say, shiny shoes in the ring. And that's always cool for me. And also, I want to say, hey, when you talk about participating in shows outside of the US, hey, maybe one day we can see you in Germany. That would be awesome.
Oh, that is definitely a dream for me. I'm hoping to make that trip soon.
As always, thank you to you, Morbo, and to you, Florian, but especially to you, Aaron. We are very happy that you could make it and that you could be our guest today. As Morbo said, we are both huge fans of you, and you and I also have met in person before, and therefore this was really special to me. Thank you, and thank you to all our listeners, and I hope you will listen to us in the future again. Goodbye.